Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture with a rogue attitude every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on youtube.com/Rogue Matter and facebook.com/Rogue Matter Podcast. Join the movement, go rogue, roguematter.com. I'm your host, Michael Dolce, as always, joined by Hassan Godwin, Lord of the Radio and Lord of the Birthdays. I won't indulge anyone who caught our earlier live stream, but it was both of our birthdays, and we both had enjoyable days. We had a birthday. I had a birthday on Monday, and your birthday was yesterday. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We've got a couple. We've got the show Arcane, which I didn't watch because I totally forgot. So we're gonna do that next week. Yeah, so we're gonna do that next week. But what we luckily did get was we got a little taste of Spider-Man No Way Home. And what's kind of cool about this, people have been dying for this trailer to come out for a while. Like, I don't know if you've been perusing the interwebs. People were really looking forward to it. Like, it was almost a little, almost a little weird, right? The reason I think that they were looking forward to it, though, the reason that they were very intent about it is because of all the speculation, right? I mean, the idea, we got it with the first trailer when Doc Ock kind of crawled over and made his appearance, and you got the Green Goblin and things like that. I mean, you basically got a lot of rumors confirmed that we kind of knew was going to happen. But we didn't get the big thing, right? We didn't get the big drop, which is the former Spider-Men making an appearance, in the trailer. If they're even in the film, right? I think people, I think that was the overall, what people are really, really looking forward to in this trailer. And so Sony actually dropped the ball and was supposed to release the trailer, but then didn't release the trailer. It got delayed, and then finally they said, no, it's going to be Tuesday at 6:30, which makes you wonder if they might have been, kind of tinkering with it up until the end, or if they'd always planned to release it that day and just the internet, was the internet, right? Really good. I'm going to knock out a couple things that we do know about the trailer. All right. The trailer has a trailer. That's the first thing. There's actually a 5-second trailer for the trailer in the trailer. Kind of a meta approach to this. I'm not sure why, but that's what they've got, and that's what they're doing here. Spider-Man has a black costume. I know you noticed that, right? It's not Venom, of course, or maybe it is. Based off of the Venom movie, maybe there's a little tie-in with that. But he's definitely wearing a black costume at some point in here. The other thing I thought of was maybe it's Tobey Maguire, right? Maybe it's something to do with that. And again, Marvel has a history of editing their trailers to not feed into all this thing, all of the hype and hysteria, or to kind of throw you, kind of throw you for a loop. So black costume I thought was kind of interesting for one of those two reasons. Doctor Strange, in this particular trailer, Doctor Strange comes off different than the first trailer. It also appears as if he will be the adversary in a way in the film, because in the first trailer you have Doc Ock kind of making his appearance, but in the second trailer now, Doc Ock at some point is, I don't know, captured or contained or something to a point where they're actually, at odds with each other, or like maybe helping each other, because they kind of laugh at him when he mentions his name. So I don't know. Interesting about that. The Lizard is in the movie. Remember when we talked the first time, I was very curious about the Lizard. I couldn't even remember that the Lizard was in the first Amazing Spider-Man. So he's in this, and maybe he'll be treated correctly. And on that note, 5 of the Sinister Six are in the mix. Question then would be, who's that 6th member going to be? Is it going to be the Rhino? Are they going to drop a Paul Giamatti cameo? Because you got Electro. They showed Sandman clearly. You've got Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Scorpion. Is it Venom? Is Venom gonna fill that 6th role? I mean, oh no, it should be the Vulture, right? It's the Vulture? Yeah, no. Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Electro, and the Lizard, and a gust of sand. Yeah, maybe I guess it was the Lizard instead of Scorpion. But Mac Gargan was in the end of the last Spider-Man movie, so I kind of assume it's Scorpion that's going to be in there. But I don't know. You saw Andrew Garfield is going on record as saying he's not in the film. Like, he keeps going on record. I know. He went out of his way to really demonstratively say it, too. I mean, that's the part that's interesting. Usually they'll kind of say, like, oh, I wish I could be a part of it, but... or no, they wouldn't even say that. They would say, it would be great. Yeah, they would always do oh, it'd be great if it happened, but, unfortunately, they would kind of poo-poo it. This guy's just straight out lying. And that's... I find that very impressive. I find it very impressive that he's just straight out lying. Well, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I find it very impressive that if he turns out to be in the movie, he is just straight out lying right here. Like, that's the part that I'm really enjoying. That's where I'm 100% on board with you, and I'll get to the other 3 things that we didn't mention in the 10 takeaways, but I'm actually 100% on board with you. I really do think fandom is ruining it. I checked out the trailer just like everyone else did because this is what we do when we review these trailers and people get excited about it. They like Spider-Man. It makes sense. But even I'm kind of like, damn, I didn't like that this trailer to me now shifted positions and I really started grasping what the story is. I've never been a fan of that. You can tell that the enthusiasm for Spider-Man is through the roof, versus like something like Eternals, because Eternals is like a property people don't really know about and they're not very familiar with. So it's kind of it's cool in a way to be this excited for a movie, and I am this excited for a movie. So, but it's very difficult when I feel as if I've almost now spoiled it for myself. It reminds me of the days when I was so excited for the Buffy premieres and for the Buffy episodes to come out that I would go and it's like an addiction almost. And I feel like we're addicted to the internet and we're addicted to news and we're addicted to that feeling of just that hit of some sort of level of excitement. And it is. I agree with you. I think it's might be involving.
That'd be you speculating.
Something else. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, look, that's part and parcel of it. Real quick, I wanted to go deeper into this, but obviously since we're having audio issues, we'll go straight to our guest very shortly, in Jeffrey Dauber. Ridley Scott recently came out, and he was talking about the superhero movies are now boring. I'll read you his quote, and he essentially says that he's kind of in the boat of Martin Scorsese now, but he's very honed in on superhero movies, and this is what he kind of said. He said this: almost always the best films are driven by characters, and we'll come to superheroes after this if you want, because I'll crush it. I'll effing crush it. They're boring as S. Their scripts are not any effing good. I think I've done 3 great scripted superhero movies. One would be Alien with Sigourney Weaver, one would be Gladiator, and one would be Blade Runner. They're superhero movies, so why don't the superhero movies have better stories? Sorry, I got off the rail, but I mean, come on. They're mostly saved by special effects, and that's becoming boring for everyone who works with special effects if you've got the money. The reason I brought this up is this is, A, is a recent quote. He just made this. But B, after we're post-Eternals and we're pre-Spider-Man, and I got to tell you, my level of excitement for Spider-Man is at an all-time high. I'm looking forward to this film more than I've looked forward to a lot of the recent Marvel fare. DC, I think there's Justice League, but I was maybe curious to see the Snyderverse cut of Justice League. Suicide Squad was whatever. I'm not, I wasn't through the roof waiting for that to come out. So part of me sits there and says, he's got a point, except in this particular case, I'm really looking forward to Spider-Man. However, to back up his point, I'm only excited about it because it's gonna bring together all of the Spider-Man movies, which I guess can be a nod to the story, but it's more of a nod to the gimmick. So am I more interested in the gimmick than the story? And if that's the case, is he right? Are superhero movies, have we seen so many of them now to the point where, the stories are not, they're very formulaic and they're very, we talk about the Marvel formula all the time. Shang-Chi has the Marvel formula. DC films, aren't great, by track record. What do you think of Ridley's?
You and Ridley Scott are not the target audience.
I get it.
That's all. If he doesn't think that the stories are any good,
Mm-hmm.
then that's his prerogative, just the same as you. However, the stories are successful. That means that they're going to keep going on.
Yeah, but what do you think about? What do you think about?
I'm explaining to you what
Okay,
I think about. Regardless of how he feels about it, right? He knows he's in an industry that is about making money. It's not as much about the art as it should be, right?
Yeah.
This is an attention-seeking statement because he knows it's gonna kick a hornet's nest, right? It doesn't really matter that the stories are quote unquote no good because the movies are successful.
Okay.
The industry is not suffering because of these movies. If there was a crisis and the industry was suffering because of these movies, his statement might come off a little more sincere.
Yeah.
But he knows what he's talking. He knows what he's doing by sending that signal out.
Yeah.
For anybody who's willing to, who's willing to freak out by it.
Yeah.
Whether he not if he's doing it deliberately as a marketing or as an attention getting scheme, or if that's exactly how he really feels. The bottom line is that the movies just aren't made for him.
Yeah.
Just like, Phineas and Ferb, is adolescent drudgery to someone like me because I'm not the target audience. I'm not who the story was meant for. So I'm not who the content is meant for. It's not going to respond to me in a desirable manner.
Well, let me ask you a question though, based off of what you just said, whether or not it's made for you, what is your opinion on the current state of the superhero story? You're saying it's not made for you, so automatically you're just saying it's not good.
I'm talking about making a statement about, okay, this all sucks and stuff like, yeah, okay, that's how Ridley Scott feels about it.
Yeah, no, I know that. I know that. I want to go past that though. I want to know what you think what is the current state of the superhero story or the superhero movie, the stories within the superhero movie.
I don't think there's any one kind of superhero story or superhero movie. I think there are several kinds. I think some work and some don't.
Mm-hmm.
But it does follow a formula, but it's a formula we've been following ourselves for over 40 years. And it's a formula that they've been following since before the 1950s.
Yeah.
So, are we going to relitigate that? And I might add, those formulas are still, they're still successful.
Yeah.
So I don't understand.
You keep talking about like the formula successful, the movie successful, the target audience, this and that. I'm just wondering, out of the past year, 2021, if you had to sum up the superhero movie in 2021, would you say more bad than good, more good than bad? The stories are acceptable, they're okay. Was there anything, that you can, that off the top of your head you can sit back and go, you know what, that story, was either something that you really responded to?
I think Venom was terrible.
Touche.
That was the worst experience I had in the superhero realm, right?
Yeah.
So yes,
I
think Ridley is absolutely correct on that in that capacity.
In the past 10 years, I'm going to give you a 10-year gap. Not when you're like a kid. I don't want because we can definitely look at things as a kid differently than we do now. In the past 10 years, let's say, right? The last 10 years is the mecca of superhero sagas lately, right?
No.
Of the superhero movie, just in terms of output?
What do you mean by the mecca?
In terms of output and in terms of popularity, right? So there's never been more superhero movies than the past 10 years. Is that a true,
That's fair.
that's a fair statement, right? So I'm just
Yeah.
basing it on the last 10 years. Can you which movie, if you can recall, and I'm asking on the spot here, but which movie can you recall walking out of the theater going like, wow, blow you away in the past 10 years? If there's one that can come to mind.
In the past 10 years, you want me to go through 10 years worth of movie experiences to tell you which one was my favorite?
Not your favorite. I'm just saying, just the most noteworthy in your, just one that's what I'm saying. I don't want to pick your favorite because that's tough to ask within 10 years. I'm saying you walked out and you were like, wow, that's something. That's
Does
something.
it have to be a superhero movie or just a movie?
Yes. No, because I want to.
I don't know. I guess Endgame.
Okay. So Endgame would be that experience for you, and I agree with that. I agree. I actually liked Infinity War better, and I responded more to Infinity War, but I agree that was a superhero movie that took it to a different level. I think Infinity War also would fit that. I think Winter Soldier kind of fit that, right, in the sense of giving us something a little different than.
And you asked for one.
I was trying to make it easy on you. If you have more, feel free to share more. I have no problem with that. I was just trying to make it easy.
Okay. But I'll go with Endgame. So what's your
I'm trying to parse whether he's right or not. I'm trying to parse the experiences I can think of.
He's neither right or wrong. It's his opinion.
All right, I'm trying to parse whether or not I agree with it.
That's different.
I'm trying to parse whether or not I agree.
Well, here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Well, that's what I'm almost doing a pro and con list. Do you ever do one of those when you're trying to make a decision on something?
Yeah, but I mean, you can't really. You don't need my opinion to help you formulate your.
Well, I want to know your opinion as well too.
I mean, look, I said, I already gave you my opinion on what he said. I think those movies are not made for him. It's just like the same with Scorsese when he said the same thing. It's fine.
Yeah, but you're focusing your answer on him. I'm trying to ask you. If you,
yeah, but I don't contextualize the stuff like that.
No,
like like they are what they are. When they stop becoming successful, we'll know the age is over. We'll know the time is over. But I mean, do I agree? I just sat here and told you I enjoyed the last superhero movie I just watched. So obviously, I do not agree with his attitude about stories or whatnot, I mean, and also I sat through his Prometheus and I sat through.
No, yes, I don't.
So
it's funny you brought that up.
If you want to make a war about it, it's fine. I did not see The Last Duel. I didn't get a chance to. I didn't want to see it. And he made probably if not my second most favorite movie I've ever seen, then it's in the top 5.
Yeah,
which is Kingdom of Heaven. So, I mean, I love Ridley Scott. I think he's earned the right to have any kind of opinion he wants about it. But I'm not going to formulate my opinion on his opinion. I don't really. It's like, all right, well, if I go to Ridley Scott next time I'm at Ridley Scott's house, I'm not going to suggest we pop in Amazing Spider-Man. That's all. That's basically what I know.
Okay. That. All right. Overall, I actually, up until seeing this trailer, and that's what brought this up to me. Up until this trailer, I kind of agree with them. I think they have gotten boring. I think. But
you just said you're excited about this.
I said up until the trailer, right? Up until this trailer dropped, and up until this movie.
So doesn't that answer your question? That all you needed was more stimuli, and then you'd be excited again?
Yeah.
And I mean, look, if you're finding that movies or comic book movies or whatever are trite, and they're not high intellectual art, right? Then
he didn't say
what
that.
Is it?
He didn't say that. He just said boring. That it's getting boring.
That's exactly what I said. I just used different words to say it. Right. So anyway, if you're feeling that way, and then yet you see a trailer and you're right back in the game, then that's indication for yourself that the formula works.
But again, what I was excited about is the gimmick. I think I'm excited about the gimmick. I think I'm excited.
Do you think they care why you're going to see it?
You keep doing that though. You keep bringing up them and they and the movie executives and things like that. I'm just talking about it from a personal experience, from a personal story.
Yeah, but who are we talking about? Like you're talking, Ridley Scott's talking about the producers of this content. right? Isn't that who we're talking about? About the people who make the content, as to whether they're making trite and boring content, or overly formulaic content, or
I think he's talking about the films themselves, though. Actually,
I mean, talking about the films in themselves into what context? About what they're made, how they're made, or whether they should be making different kinds of film, right? What's the nature of why he's making that commentary in the first place?
I think he's talking about making superhero movies better.
And who would he be talking to?
No, I get it, but again, everything I'm asking is just how when I'm bringing this up, I wanted to know your personal feelings on that question.
I know.
I'm saying my personal feelings on it is that I kind of agree with him in the sense that nothing up until this Spider-Man trailer, to me, I think in the past
year or two.
Here's
the thing: you're saying the only reason you want to go see this movie is because of the gimmick.
Well, that's why I'm even questioning why I want to go see it. Yeah.
That's why anybody wants to see any movies, because of some kind of catch-all aspect of it that they want to go see.
Right, and obviously we haven't seen the movie yet; it isn't out yet. But I'm curious to know what my reaction is going to be, if it's going to fall in line with my reactions of the past superhero films I've seen. The past superhero films I've seen have not, even Venom 2, which I enjoyed. Like, I enjoyed the experience, but I didn't walk out of there thinking that was high art or great art, as you put it. I almost enjoyed it just because it was anti everything that we've seen up until this point. I think what I'm trying to say is I think I agree with him. I think things are getting boring. I think it's almost to the point where we're not seeing other kind of films. And now he uses Alien as an example of a superhero film that he made, right? In a way, I kind of agree with. I kind of understand what he's saying when he says that. A Gladiator, I mean, that's just a Gladiator movie. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what he meant. And Blade Runner, I wouldn't. These are all sci-fi films. Yeah. Maybe
I'm not gonna go on record with my opinion of any of those movies. But I mean, here's the thing: Gladiator is a remake of a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know how Alien is a superhero movie, but okay. And Blade Runner, I got my issues with that story. If he's talking about story,
yeah.
So I definitely do not have issues with the craftsmanship behind the movie or his directing.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna call out stories, I don't know about the Blade Runner story.
Yeah.
It's a very overly simplistic story.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's very style over substance. And I don't hate it. I think Blade Runner is amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing film. But I mean, if we're going to break it down, but that's the thing. I wouldn't sit there and watch a Blade Runner movie and go, this story is very trite.
Yeah.
I'd be like, wow, this is the craftsmanship behind this movie is amazing. This is definitely a visual tour de force. And this is why I'm in this theater watching this film.
Yeah.
Right. If I went to see Blade Runner, Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner movie, it has more substance story wise than the original Blade Runner, and it copies a lot of the visual beats of the original Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I still hold the original Blade Runner as in higher regard, as a higher piece of art, because it is the groundbreaking piece, right? It's the one that brought that it's the person that brought Denis Villeneuve to the dance in the first place, right? So fine, but I mean, if I sat there and say, this doesn't move me like, Remains of the Day moved me, like that's a false comparison,
Yeah.
Sometimes you're there just for the gimmick.
Yeah.
And like I said before, like the people who make these movies, the people who are behind it, if you're trying to send a message to them that they need to make better that they need to make better content, then telling them I'm only going to see your movie for the gimmick is not going to get them to change their mind, because they're going to be like, yeah, but you're going, right? Yeah, I got your cash already, right? So obviously it works. Why break it if it's not broken? So, I don't get what the purpose of this. It's not you. I understand why you're asking a question, but I don't get the purpose of. I think the question he asked is attention getting, because it's just his opinion.
Right.
And also because of the nature of the internet today, he's not allowed to have an opinion that's not a popular opinion.
Correct.
Right?
Well, he's also not allowed to have an opinion without it being spun into something that'll make you click.
Exactly. So there it is. He won. Right? Everybody clicked on his article, and now everybody's talking about Ridley Scott. Maybe not favorably, but I mean, maybe he doesn't care about that.
Yeah. Well,
work for Scorsese.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that bears watching, because the other aspect to this too is people aren't making the next Alien. They're not making the next. Well, let me rephrase that. Studios are not funding the next Alien. Studios are not funding the next Blade Runner. And again, I use Eternals as an example. Even within the superhero genre, the attempt to do something new, it tends to get mixed reviews when it does. So maybe he's also speaking out against that.
All it's going to take is for someone to do something out in the ordinary, and for that thing to make a ton of money, and then all of a sudden everybody will shift their track, and those movies start getting made, 100% again. Yeah, none of these executives grew up wanting to make superhero movies. They just wanted to be rich.
Yeah.
So superhero movies is the way these movies are gonna be their path to the golden place.
Yeah.
And then that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah. I see the exchange going on the Facebook feed. Glad your audio is working again. It's always nicer when you can talk back. Alfred Jonathan Ganjimi. AJ's going to kill me for butchering his last name. He said Alien is a superhero movie, but not comic book. You replied, obviously, that who's the superhero? Why she's super?
Let's make it binary. Let's get into that binary fight there.
Let's see about the. Well, I mean, look, you could say Ripley. Licks. You could say Ripley is a superhero.
Sure, he could feel that way. It's his prerogative.
Well, because theoretically speaking, remember, Batman doesn't have superpowers either. He dresses like a bat and has money.
Right, but Ripley doesn't dress up in a costume and chase aliens all over the place. She's literally surviving a pretty bad event. And I'm not talking about Ripley the character. I'm talking about Ripley as depicted in the first Alien movie, which is what he was referring to. So she's not a superhero. I would say probably by Alien 4, you could probably call her a superhero, but that's because the stories have become ludicrous and absurd at that point. So, which pretty much is in keeping with Ridley Scott's original statement in the first place.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Die Hard films now, too, where Die Hard films have now turned into superhero movies because Bruce Willis is surviving things that no normal human could ever do. We're going to have Bruce Willis's co-star on the show next week. So I did that.
Good segue, man. That was really sharp. That's smooth.
No, that's not a segue. That's a plug.
Real smooth.
That's a shameless plug.
All right. So is this discussion over? Are we done with this discussion?
I think we are superheroes for persevering through all the audio issues tonight. I think that was that's the takeaway I got. All right. What do you guys think? Do you disagree? Do you agree with Ridley Scott? Chat away in the Facebook chat, in the YouTube chat. Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. What are your takeaways? What do you think? When we come back, we've got a great guest. We pre-recorded the interview earlier today. Jeffrey Dauber is going to talk to us about American comics, a history. He goes deep into all the eras, talks about the genres, talks about stuff that we didn't even know. And it's basically just a bunch of geeks who love comics geeking out over comics. I think that fits the bill for most of our audience. So we will see you guys very shortly after this break. But first, just wanted to let you guys know to go to roguematter.com right now and check out the sneaker promo that's going on. We're giving away this awesome pair of custom designed sneakers designed by @FitMySole, FITMYSOLE. Go check him out on Instagram. Fill out the giveaway form on the front page. Be also sure to support Elijah Rutland. He is the artist of these custom sneakers as well. When we come back, a history of comics and things you may not have known. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast. Excited to be joined by Jeffrey Dauber, the author of The American History of Comics. Jeremy, how's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on the show, you guys. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. First of all, you are a professor at Columbia University, so you're probably way smarter than both of us. Definitely smarter than me. Maybe smarter than Hassan. He's a pretty smart guy. So it's always wonderful to bring on an added level of intelligence to the sub humor that we typically have on our show.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to having a great conversation with you guys.
So I have one question. That's it. I have one question for this interview, and I feel this interview because Hassan and I, in addition to being comic book geeks, we make comics for a living as well too. So I feel like one question is all we're going to need. What inspired you to write The American History of Comics? And before you answer, I'll give a quick background. You're a professor of Yiddish language, literature, and American culture at Columbia University. So it's funny. Your bio doesn't quite. Where did this come from? What inspired you to do this?
Well, I will say that, the one, I don't know about professors' intelligence, but you ask us one question, we can easily talk for 20 minutes. So there's no question that we could do that. But I hope we'll have a good conversation. I will say that, I do teach Jewish literature. I teach American studies. But my first coming to this was just as a childhood comics fan. I mean, I grew up reading comics. I was a Marvel zombie. I think I'm older maybe than both of you guys, but I was a Marvel zombie in the 80s. I bought everything they came out with. And sort of all the steps, just as I was sort of getting a little old for that, that's when Mouse and Watchmen came out.
Okay.
I went to go to college. I kind of come back. People are like, you got to try this thing called Sandman. And that blew me away, And then I actually was going to a Jewish literature conference and they said, do you want to give a paper on something? It's a trip to Seattle. And I said, oh, well, I could give a paper on Will Eisner. And that really started me saying this. And then Paul Levitz, who is the former president of DC Comics.
He's been a guest on our show.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Well, when Paul stepped down from DC, he was looking to do some teaching, and he came to Columbia, and he and I then started teaching a class together on comic books, or on American comics, I should say.
Sure.
And so we said, how do we put together this class? And it became clear that once we started, we wanted to put together something that not only focused on, superheroes and that kind of stuff, but alternative, independent, comic strips. And we said, hey, there's a story here. And I decided, there's a book in this. And I went ahead and wrote it up. And now it's available in stores everywhere.
How extensive did the research go? And what kind of, when you were doing your research, did you kind of find areas like, wow, I didn't know this, or being a self-proclaimed Marvel zombie, was there things that kind of all of a sudden took you in a different direction than you thought you'd go?
Well, being a self-proclaimed Marvel zombie and teaching a class with the former president of DC, that was already. But no, I do think what was interesting was, once you're starting to teach these things next to each other in a class, you're beginning to see some connections maybe that you wouldn't have thought of before. You say, okay, well, here's this connection between EC Comics and the Underground and some of the superheroes, and then Love and Rockets, and so you're beginning to tell a story in your head. But when you start really digging into the research, the interviews with all these creators, you're finding these sort of subterranean connections that you sort of hoped would exist, but you weren't really sure. So when you have someone, like Spain, one of the great underground cartoonists, say, I was a member of, I think it was the Captain Marvel fan club as a kid, you're saying, Yahtzee, I've really found some of these connections here. And that was part of this argument that I think I'm trying to make in the book, that it's all part of one grand tapestry, and that these things that sometimes people think of as disparate, really, there's a lot of connections that we can sort of talk about.
You said you're an 80s guy. My heart is in the early 90s. I thought the early 90s was probably the most, not just in comics, but in art in general. I thought, Hassan and I have a big music background, and it seemed to be, to me, one of the most inspirational eras in comics. Also one of the most detrimental later on, but I mean, the early 90s, maybe let's even go 88, 89 to like 92, 93 was one of the most inspirational eras in comics. What's your take on the 90s, on that time, and what's your favorite era after having done all the research?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one of that is a period where, as you guys are talking about, we have this miracle wave of 86, right? We have sort of Watchmen, we have Mouse, we have this. People are beginning to say, wait a minute, this can be a grown-up medium. The comic stores are in full flower. So you have this sort of venue for a lot of material that can really be really for grown-ups and in a place where it's being sort of showcased by people who are loving it and sort of introducing it to it. Lots of anthologies are blooming. Lots of people. Vertigo, what would become Vertigo, is sort of really beginning to take shape. It's just an amazing period of the promise of 86 coming into flower over those next years. New arrangements with things like Image and things. I mean, there are things that are beginning to develop in terms of sort of artistic action, a lot of that kind of stuff. So it really is a great period to think about. And some of my favorite comics, which really are sort of that Vertigo or proto-Vertigo stuff, Sandman, that really is from right in that period that you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
So I do love that period, and it is a period that I'm fond of. I would say in many ways the period that I was the least familiar with myself, and the one that was in some ways the most revelatory, historically speaking, was that countercultural independent comics rise sort of the late 60s and early 70s.
Okay.
It's in the history books. I kind of had to bone up on it to do my sort of lecture on it for the class.
Sure.
But you say, wow, they really are trying to figure out how to tell personal stories about comics, how to be very explicitly political, how to push the edges both for good and for ill. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and to watch them trying to kind of figure it out really was a fascinating thing, particularly since I was reading all of this, in only over the matter of a couple of months to do the reading.
So one of the arguments we always make, right, or people online always make, it's like, well, comics aren't as good as they used to be. How far along in this history do you go? Do you go into present day, or as close, or how close to present day do you go? And what do you say to that? You've now been able to kind of see the whole lifespan of the comic industry. What is your comment to that comment?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, and it's not technically about comic books, but since this is a very wide-ranging podcast, I can say, is that phrase that the golden age of science fiction is 12. Right? Everybody looks back. Everybody says, that was what, right? And so is my heart also when I was 12, in the mid, of course it is, right? But on the other hand, if you look at some of the material that's coming out now, some of the new genres, some of the noir material, some of the science fiction, the fantasy, the kids material, it just, the level of craft in the writing, the level of craft in some of the art, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. Right. And some of and I will also say that thanks to the internet, we have this incredible democratization of comics in a way that we weren't, if you were someone who didn't traditionally have access, whether geographically or because of diversity reasons or for a wide variety of things, you can put your stuff out there and people are going to gravitate to it. And it's amazing what's out there. One of the problems for writing the book is, there's so much that it's kind of hard to put your arms around. But that's a luxury problem, and I'm delighted to have it.
I find that with a lot of genres now too. I mean, not just genres, but a lot of, again, talking about music, talking about movies and things like that, because, it's like the good and the bad, right? The good is that anybody can do it now. There's no gatekeepers. The bad news is now there's so much content out there that it, being able to sift through and parse, I don't even know how you would do a modern day history of comics, because you're probably leaving someone out somewhere.
You unquestionably are. And, and this book was originally in some ways in draft. It was almost twice, it's already a big book, but it was almost twice as long. Sure. And we just had to cut it down because you just can't talk about everything. And even the everything that I tried to talk about would have been, not everything. There's just so much to say. But, luckily, as you sort of tell the whole story, you can begin to say, here are things that are commenting on earlier trends that are in communication with this, that are moving forward. You sort of tell that story moving forward.
The speculator boom and bust was a big story for comics because, I mean, it bankrupted Marvel. It it nearly sunk the entire industry. How deep do you go into it in the book?
I got to say, this was one of the advantages of teaching a class with Paul Levitz, who, of course, was involved in many different aspects of the comic industry, but was also a businessman. And so he was constantly pushing us in the class to think about, the business side of these things.
Sure.
And so that story definitely comes out in the book as well. In the Marvel story, the speculation in every aspect of this, in image and now with the title, sort of even the moving back to number ones, again and again, all sorts of things. So that kind of is very much part of that story. I think that right now, one of the things which is amazing is that I have these little kids, and they read these comics, and they couldn't care less about the value, right? They just love Dogman. They love this Avengers, this is what they care about. And that magic was nice to see as you threatened to get sort of too much involved in the business side.
Being able to span all the way toward the beginning, what struck you about the beginnings of the iconic characters that we know and love today?
Well, it's a great way. As you had pointed out before, I did come to this academically through a kind of Jewish literary background, and there's a lot of talk in the comics business about the fact that many of these first generation superhero creators are Jewish. And I think that sometimes that argument is a little bit overdetermined of whether there's Jewishness in Superman or things like that. But I do think that there's no question that, this is a very kind of American story of saying, okay, we can't get into this medium of the comic strips. This is a very hard medium to break into. So we're going to sort of do what we can as a marginalized, group around the edges. We're going to package these sort of old comic strips and turn them into books and try and make a living there. And sort of say, well, we can't get in. So if we fail that, we're going to put some new material in these comic books. And boom, there Superman appears.
Sure.
Failed comic strip, right? And then takes off. And, Siegel and Schuster, they, we can talk about all sorts of other things, but they, like so many of the Jews of that generation, they were anti-Hitler before everybody else was.
Sure.
And so you have Joe Simon and Jack Kirby at Captain America punching Hitler. That is one area where I do think that some of that stuff really sort of does jump out, this sort of anti-Nazi stuff of that first generation. Certainly to someone like me from my
sure.
Yeah. Please.
Well, just one question.
That's what I said, but look where we got.
I know. Kind of, it's sort of a strange question, but it seems like a question that no one really gets too deeply into. With the benefit of all the research that you've done, what do you think of the medium of comic books in and of itself? Is it and I mean, this sounds like a dumb question, but is it a viable medium? Is it comparable to higher forms of pop culture like movies and literature?
I don't think it's a dumb question at all. I think first it's a very important one, because I think all too often in a lot of the discussions that people have about comics, they confuse medium and genre, which of course you're not doing, right? But they say, oh, it's a superhero genre, or from another angle, it's an autobiographical genre, right? But no, it's a medium. And what are the features of that medium that stand up against some of these other media? And to me, what's amazing about it, this juxtaposition of words and text, which is it doesn't have to be that way, but the usual way of doing it, right? And the sequential is the amount of incredible work that the reader can do in partnership with the artists. In order to, right, Scott McCloud, that great theorist of comics, often talks about this in terms of the gutter, right, that breaks up different panels, that we are kind of doing a lot of work here. But the kind of visual sophistication that's required in really decoding a comic, that people who read this as kids sort of suck in with their mother's milk, so to speak. That allows for kinds of effects and kind of thinking about things that a lot of media that just sort of unspool in front of you at exactly the rate that the projectionist or the TV or whatever it is wants. It's different. We can dwell on things. We can have implication in much more powerful ways. I really think that, as you're saying, I think that medium really allows for a blossoming of a certain kind of readerly visual imagination that other media don't have in that same kind of way. So I think it's if it's deployed properly, right? You have good comics, good and bad, but it can do really remarkable things in a way that a lot of these other things simply can't do by definition.
It just seems to be like a thing that nobody really talks about as the medium itself. Like they talk about, like you say, they talk about the genres and the different ages and the, and different, different varieties of the kind of stories you could tell. But I still think that the comic book medium in and of itself, like the 22, if you want to just go standard, the 22 page, booklet or magazine-let that it started out, I still think it hasn't reached its full potential yet, in terms of how far it can be pushed. And you with your research, I wondered if you either felt the same or you felt maybe it's gone too far,
I think that, it was this interesting thing of juggling my different roles in the book as historian, as a critic.
Sure.
And as historian, you watch them invent these things over the decades. And I try to give this kind of sense of adventure in the book where they kind of say, first, technical things like the team up. Someone had to invent the team up, right? That seems very obvious, right? But like, hey, here's 2 years, let's put them together. But they do that around 1940-ish, right? They invent the team up. And then people saying, wait a minute, we're used to strips that, go like this. This is a verbal, right? They go across, right? But let's use the page as an entire, right? Let's use double page spreads. Let's let's take certain kinds of technical innovations with computer generated, and let's put that in. So you have these constant technical, and then you have these great innovators who are constantly pushing. What I mean, manga, comes as an influence in the 80s. That same real period that you guys are talking about that's really where it begins to really make its way in some ways. That those sort of a little earlier, maybe with Frank Miller, but really kind of come in and say, let's let these pages breathe. Let's have a lot less words. So all of this stuff, as you're saying, all this stuff is coming and pushing the media, the medium in different ways, and everyone's sort of learning from each other, and that's an incredibly exciting thing to track and to see. And I think we would be remiss if we said, oh, right now in 2021, that's where that innovation stops, right? I think clearly, we're in the middle of this, and that's how I end the book, actually, by saying we're still in the middle of the story. We're gonna keep finding this. This is my nice way of saying, if you want a revised edition 6 or 7 years down the line, feel free. But
well, it's actually a great question though too, because it's and a great segue into the next question, which is, it is a medium, but now with technology and with the advent of digital, and we have what quote unquote digital comics, but you also have motion comics, you have motion graphics, you have all this kind of, extra bells and whistles. How do you separate a traditional, pen on paper printed comic from all the digital technological things we can do now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think again, there's an old economist saying that predictions are hard, especially about the future, and so I like to look to the past, right? So in like 1952, 3D comics was the craze, right? And everyone was like, "This is the future of comics. We're going to all wear red and green or whatever," and that people said, "Okay, well, that was a false start." When mobile starts, people said, "Oh, these mobile phones are perfect for comics because you're going to have one panel at a time from the comic strips, and you're going to press, and you're going to press, and you're going to press." That, I think it's fair to say, didn't really take off either, right? People are still trying to figure out all these things, and I think they're going to be like little branches off to the side that are going to get pruned into some frame of the story. That said, it seems very clear to me that increasingly, as is already the case, a lot of original art is going to be primarily, if not solely, created on a computer using digital techniques. And so, the question, if you look at the 80s, the 90s, the period that you're talking about, one of the business questions is, who gets the original art?
Yeah.
That's a question that digital technology kind of renders moot, right?
Yeah.
So there's no Bristol, there's no sheet. So, there are going to be those kinds of changes as well. And, as I say, those a lot of these things are still playing themselves out, but you can look at trends and say, this probably is not, we're not going to come back from. and we're going to look at other trends. People said, "Oh, everybody is never going to read comics on paper again once Comixology really takes it."
Sure.
That does not seem to be the case, right? It simply doesn't.
I find that the floppies, the single issues, if I'm going to make a prediction, are more and more going to be digital, just because of the cost involved in making comics, and also the likelihood that someone would walk into a comic book store, I think, is less and less, because it's very specialty, versus walking into like a Barnes and Noble or even going on an Amazon and being able to order, all 6 issues. Do you think that's going to be the trend also, if you had to prognosticate, if you had to look into the future and say, is the death of the floppy the next transition, versus what we have today?
I think on the one hand, I will say that the death of the floppy has been predicted, over and over again, and it hasn't quite happened yet. And in some sense, the sales are actually surprisingly good right at this very particular moment. People thought Corona was going to kill the floppy, but on the other hand, I think if you would talk to someone in 1985, right, and you had said by 1992, which is not a long time, 7 years, right?
Right.
People are going to say, a lot of people are going to say, you know what? I really understand that all these things are going to be collected in books that are going to be available at a bookstore. And I'm going to wait until that. I don't need to go to my comic shop. I'm going to wait to see that collected edition of Sandman. Right. People would say, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. That's
right.
That's right. 7 years. Boom. So I hate making predictions about the future in that way, because 7 years is not a very long
time. You just come back on the show and you say you were wrong. It works out just fine.
I love it.
We do it every week. Last question for you. What is your go-to? I want to read something. It can either be a book that's going on right now or in your collection. And then, what's your guilty pleasure? The one book that, or the one title that you don't necessarily advertise that you liked.
Well, those are 2 great questions. I mean, my wife, it drives my wife crazy because I never can answer a question in the abstract. So I always, it really depends on who the person is, what they kind of like, what other things they're interested in. So I tend to have this long conversation. There's no one size that fits all. And, in the book, that's why I have hundreds of different sort of possibilities, a reading list for all sorts of different kinds of people. So I'm going to punt on that one, because it is hard for me to give an answer in the abstract. For a guilty pleasure, I have to say, and I understand, but we're all products of our time.
Sure.
The book that the high level book that I return to over and over again is Sandman, and the slightly lower level book are things by Garth Ennis.
Okay.
My next book is about horror. My next big book, I think, will be about horror, and this is not a book for the faint of heart. It's not. It has a book with lots of issues to it, but for those people who really are interested in extreme horror, Garth Ennis and Jason Burroughs' Crossed is sort of the most brutal thing that I've seen, particularly the original series. So this is something that, again, if you are interested in horror, it is not for the faint of heart, and there are a lot of, but it is something that I come to, even though when my child was born, I literally would not have it in the house. That was how much I didn't want it. There's this book called The King in Yellow, or this book about a book called The King in Yellow, about a book that sort of causes madness when you touch it. And there's something of the Necronomicon, of this Crossed book. But that is a guilty pleasure, because I literally feel guilty having it in the house and hiding it from my kids. So that's what I'll say for that one.
The book is called American Comics: A History by Jeffrey Dauber. It's out now. Tell folks where they can find it, where they can order it, and tell folks where they can connect with you online.
Well, thank you. It's the book is available in bookstores now everywhere. It's out now. You can buy it online in sort of any place that you normally purchase books online. You can find me online on Twitter at Jeremy Dauber, or at my website, jeremydauber.com. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, guys.
Well, Jeremy, when you have the horror book, you come back on. Hassan will hide. I'll brace through somehow, and I'll get through that. Actually, it'll probably be vice versa, though. He's more of a horror guy than I am. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on.
This was wonderful. Thank you guys for having me on. This was great.
When we come back, we will put a bow on tonight's episode. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast. Excited to be Rogue Wave. Hi guys, Mike Dolce here from the Rogue Wave podcast. If you like this video, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps us out. Leave a comment, let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes, and tune in every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, for a brand new episode of the Rogue Wave podcast.